Psychologists in the development of the U.S. HeadStart program. In the year 1964, about 1 in 5 people living in the United States lived below the poverty level. Disparities in access to education often played a substantial role in perpetuating American poverty. The Head Start program was started in 1964 as a part of President Lyndon Johnson's promise to wage a war on poverty. Since 1965, it has served 32 million children. Head Start was designed to break cycles of poverty and inequality by providing services to children of low-income families in order to help with emotional, social, health, nutritional, and psychological needs that may not be met for these disadvantaged children. Psychologists played a direct, important role in the development of this program, and many of the problems the program sought to solve are subjects of psychological research. While many academics in the early half of the 20th century believed that intelligence, or IQ, was completely hereditary and fixed at birth, a handful of psychologists vocally disagreed with this consensus and argued for the idea that early childhood training could make a substantial difference. Byrd T. Baldwin, a psychologist at the University of Iowa, was one of the first psychologists to advocate for the importance of supporting young children and encouraging their intellectual development. In 1927, he argued for a nationwide system of preschools to encourage the development of young children to reach their academic potential. Kurt Lewin, another prominent psychologist in the early 20th century, was also a strong advocate of this position and worked for the Iowa Child Welfare Research Station at the University of Iowa, where he contributed to pioneering research into child development and child psychology. The book The Organization of Behavior, written by Donald O. Hebb in 1949, was another prominent argument against the fixed IQ theories of the time. In this book, Hebb argued that differences in IQ stemmed in large part from early learning and childhood environment rather than fixed hereditary differences. In 1964, the Economic Opportunity Act was proposed to Congress, which included programs to address educational disparities in poor communities. The bill was controversial, and Urie Bronfenbrenner, a psychologist at Cornell University, was among those who testified to Congress against the proposed act because it failed to provide enough direct help to young children, instead focusing too much on interventions for older children. He cited research on the risks faced by poor children during early development and argued the act should include a network of daycare centers to directly help preschool children. While the bill ultimately passed, it did not provide the comprehensive help for preschool children that many advocated argued it should. After the Economic Opportunity Act was passed, Sergeant Shriver, a trusted advisor of President John F. Kennedy and director of the Peace Corps, was commissioned to direct the newly established U.S. Office of Economic Opportunity. Part of his responsibility was to establish a national early childhood education program to address disparities in high-quality preschool for disadvantaged children. In early 1965, the Head Start Planning Committee was assembled. This was a group of experts including psychologist Urie Bronfenbrenner, Edward Ziegler, and Mamie Clark, convened to develop and implement the Head Start program to best meet the various needs of disadvantaged preschool children. Many aspects of the program were controversial within the committee, including the size of classes and the inclusion of medical components and wide-ranging comprehensive child development care. Urie Bronfenbrenner and Edward Ziegler, in particular, wrote later that many experts wanted to pilot the programs on smaller groups of children before increasing the scope of the projects. Despite these protests, and due in large part to the desire of the program's director, Sergeant Shriver, to make a large political impact, the program was authorized to serve 100,000 children in its rollout in the summer of 1965. There were other points of arguments between scientists assembled in the planning committee who were concerned with disseminating a high-quality intervention, and administrators committed to rolling out a politically and economically feasible program across the country. The training of high-quality educators was central to the success of the program, and many felt this was neglected due to lack of availability and a mentality that teaching young children was not a task that required specialized training. Despite these disagreements, the HeadStart program was begun in 1965 and continues to this day. It serves as a continuing example of how psychologists can play an important advisory role in government programs that address important issues of health and well-being in the United States.